Mboweni is giving details on economic relief live.
Rise to the occasion. The impact of the restrictions occasioned by COVID-19 has had obviously a very serious negative consequence for the South African economy. The National Treasury now projects that we will only be able to go back to the pre-COVID growth situation only in about 2023. This then calls on all of us to put our shoulders to the wheel. The recent disturbances and unrest in both KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng, but also in some other parts of the country on a smaller scale, have had a major impact on our society and on our economy. This has impacted very negatively to our economic recovery trajectory. And really, as emphasized by the president, no matter how upset you might be about one or the other, the destruction of infrastructure that belongs to all of us is really unacceptable. And for example, the current estimated costs of damage to property and infrastructure in eThekwini is around 15 billion rand. Now, this is a 15 billion rand that would normally not have to be repaired, but should have been used for better economic performance. But this destruction in eThekwini of 15 billion rand is very significant. There was destruction of shops, shopping malls, network towers, post offices, factories, roads, freight, trains, and so on. All of these destruction does not add to positive value for our society. And once again, I would like to join the president in condemning these acts of violence, of destruction that we have seen in KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng. Now, the impact of all of this is that we have to do something. We can't sit back, cry, and be sad about it, but we must do something about this. So firstly, those businesses which are insured, we are fortunate enough in South Africa that we have the South African Special Risks Insurance Association, Sasria. So Sasria has commenced and will commence with the payment of insurance claims immediately in order to assist those businesses to come back to life. Sasria is a very special mechanism which was developed, unfortunately, but now we're benefiting from it, during the apartheid period to cover for riots, destruction of property, and so on. Of course, at the launch of our democracy, we did not really anticipate that we'll have riots and destruction of property and so on, because we're a democracy, and therefore we're supposed to resolve our differences peacefully in discussions, debates, and so on. But unfortunately, we found ourselves in this position today, and therefore Sasria is going to become very handy in assisting us to come out of this difficult situation. Now, the president made announcements which I now have to buttress. Firstly, the temporary extension of the social relief of distress grant of 350 rand. This is now going to be extended up to the end of the financial year. That means March 2022. And really this is meant to react, to respond to the dire situation in which most of our people find themselves. If you drive around the country or walk around the country, you are bound to notice the extreme poverty in which our people live. And therefore, this 350 rand, no matter how small it might be, but it goes a long way to assisting our people. And this will cost about 27 billion rand, which we have to find in the system. And Dr. Mampo Mudise might talk about this later. But, looking after our own is not just a cost, but it's an investment that we should see going forward. As I mentioned, Sasria is already coming to the party, and together with other insurance companies, are speeding up the assessment process, the damage assessment process, so that they can be able to assist our companies to come back to life. And we anticipate that this will cost maybe 15 to 20 billion rand, which between Sasria and the National Treasury will have to make sure that these are met. In addition, as you are aware, the president has instructed and ordered the police and the South African National Defence Force to assist in bringing about peace and stability in our country, which is so important. And to that extent, we're allocating additional amounts for the police, some 250 million rand for the police, and 700 million rand for the South African National Defence Force, for them to be able to perform and execute this task, which has been given to them by the President of the Republic. But may I hasten to add that at the end of the day, it is not about the police. It is not about the Defence Force. It's about us in our communities to ensure that peace and stability returns to our communities. It is us who know who are the looters. It is us who know who destroyed the ATM, who destroyed the branches of banks, which makes it difficult for cash to flow in KwaZulu-Natal in particular. It's us in the community who must take responsibility for the safety and security of our assets. The Unemployment Insurance Fund, which is again another very important South African institution, will come to the party in the form of the temporary relief called TERS. And in this regard, the Minister of Employment and Labour will make further announcements. But the National Treasury, the Ministry of Finance, and the Department of Labour and the UIF stand together to assist our people as far as we can. Now, South Africa is a constitutional democracy. It is a law-governed society. There are procedures and processes which have to be followed when money is being appropriated for one purpose or the other. And the Minister of Finance is the official that is charged with the responsibility in terms of the Money Bills Act to pronounce on budgets and financial matters. To that extent, we have to approach Parliament as well in one form or the other in order for these appropriations to be fairly and fully within the legal system. Fortunately, as I said, we're a democracy and we have the ability to proceed as required in these difficult times. And then finally, there's a matter which seems to be stuck somewhere in the system. It's a matter which has to do with making an allowance for workers to have access to a percentage of their retirement funds in these times of difficulty. It's a matter that has been discussed at NEDLEC ad nauseum, and I am now determined more than ever before to ensure that the officials in the National Treasury and other relevant officials speed up this matter. A portion of their retirement fund workers should be able to access in these difficult times, maybe to finish off their bond repayments, maybe to sort out whatever debt positions they might be in. But I must warn at the same time that people must ensure that they use this facility for purposes of relief and also making better their own situation. Having said all of that, I now hand over back to you, Mashudu, and the Director General of the National Treasury will then direct whichever official might wish to say something. And Dr. Masondo is also on the line if he wants to say something. But in terms of the arrangements that we've made, Mashudu, I think I hand over to you, and maybe you hand over to DG Dondo Muhajan. Thank you very much indeed, and thanks for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you very much, Minister Mboweni, for that statement. And indeed, I will hand over to DG Mukhajani. We do have already questions streaming in for the panelists this afternoon, as well as yourself, Minister Mboweni. So once the DG has said a few words, I will definitely cross over to the Q&A. What I did forget to mention, though, when we started the Q&A was to say, whoever puts a question in the Q&A, please indicate which media house you're from. So you put your name and indicate which media house you're from so that I can relay the message appropriately to all the panelists on the line today. Thank you very much. You can go ahead, DG. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister, and thank you very much, Mashudu. Good morning, colleagues. Good morning, members of the media. As the Minister indicated, I think we have to be...
DG is good afternoon.
Oh, is it? It is definitely afternoon. It is past 12. Yes, good afternoon. Now, Minister touched on a number of things that are critical and important. He touched on the importance of the budget process, the importance of going to Parliament, which one expects that will happen, no doubt. The importance of ensuring that we are funding this package within available resources currently. We are not going to be going for borrowing at all. I think that must be clear. And if it's a question, we'll interact with that later on. This is not in any way going to include or increase our borrowing requirement. We will obviously make sure that when need be in terms of the package of measures, we have reprioritized certain budgets, in particular within the Department of Small Business Development and the Department of DTIC. We have reprioritized R1 billion in there towards support for this. The total package of support going to that intervention in supporting businesses from DTIC and small businesses totals an amount of 2.3 billion rand that is there. So there's an extra 1.3 billion rand that will go towards that. We will, as Minister indicated, support the relief of social relief of distress, extend the support for 350. The intervention that the UIF is making in numbers is about 5.3 billion rand that will go towards this initiative. And it's important that we note also that the other key intervention that we are making, as Minister indicated, is defense, 700 million, and the police, 350 million. We will be providing Sasria with a backdrop and support of about 3.9 billion immediately, and making sure, but we'll be watching very closely in ensuring that we support businesses that are there. There are some tax incentives, employment tax incentives that we're expanding, about 5 billion rand of releasing back to businesses in the form of supporting for their employment initiatives. So about 5 billion is made available for that particular. All in all, ladies and gentlemen, there's about 36 billion rand worth of support that we are putting on the table that we will be interacting with within the parliamentary system. Immediately, we will set certain processes in place for the Department of Social Development to access the 26.7 billion rand as part of this package that will make sure that we support business, small, vulnerable households, those who qualify, and we are in discussion in ensuring that that happens as soon as possible. So I will stop there, Mashudu, because I know there are many questions, and we'll specifically take particular questions in responding to them. So I thought I must just clarify the package that Minister Mboweni is talking about that you are presenting to the media today, 36.198 billion rand. Thank you very much, Mashudu.
Thank you very much for that, DG. We'll move now through to the Q&A section. The first question coming through from Janice Roberts. She's from Media 24. She says, good afternoon. My question is, how will the Treasury backstop this Sasria work? It is a blanket guarantee for the balance sheet, or is it a limited amount? How much do you think Treasury will need to inject into Sasria? The second question is from Suren Naidu. Suren did not indicate the media house that she's from, but we'll proceed with that question. This question is also on Sasria. Sasria has only around 7 billion to 10 billion rand in its reserves, so will not cover all the losses. How will Treasury or government cover the rest? And we've also got Lamise Omaji. She is from Fin24. Is there scope for the SRD to become permanent after March 2022? Any views on whether it could be the basis for introducing a basic income grant? And Suren has indicated that she is from MoneyWeb. Thank you so much, Suren. And then we also have a question from Pranisha Naidu.
Hang on. Let's deal with these things at a time.
Okay. All right. So we'll deal with the first three, Governor. Minister, we'll deal with the first three and then we'll proceed. So it's two on Sasria and the other one is on the social relief grant. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mashudu. I noticed that there's about 129 of us on this call, so we should take it in chunks. I would really like to invite Mr. Mwasheng and Cedric Masondo to respond on the Sasria issue, and then I'll buttress the matter after they've spoken. Mr. Mwasheng and Mr. Masondo.
Sorry, Minister. I just wanted to indicate that Mr. Mwasheng is having a bit of trouble connecting, but as soon as he's on the line, I'll indicate that to you. But Mr. Cedric Masondo is on the line and he could possibly respond. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Minister, and also thank you very much, Mashudu. So let me just start about just the Sasria losses, just explain. So, I mean, the numbers that we've had on the media is between 20 and 50 billion. But Sasria's liability in any particular case, it's limited to 500 million per insured. Of course, there are few policies that we write which are about 1 billion rand and so on. So, but there are not many. So our losses, or what Sasria will end up paying, it's not the total property losses as reported in the media. That's based on 500 million. But there are also people who are not buying Sasria. At this stage, our balance sheet, our assets under management, it's about 9.7 billion. But we also have a reinsurance program on top of that 9.7 of 6.5 billion. So that is only, that will cover the 500 million coupon or 500 million policy, and losses in the 1 billion coupon have a separate reinsurance structure, so where we cede 80% of the premium. So what we're looking for, it's not the full 15 million or 20 billion as indicated. So we will be able to pay almost all claims ourselves in terms of our balance sheet and reinsurance up to 15 billion. And for the 1 billion policies, Sasria's only retention, it's only 20%. I hope I've answered the question, Minister.
No, you have. You have quite adequately. And the point that we wanted to make, Mashudu, is that as Sasria continues to meet its obligations, we as a National Treasury will also be in conversation with them about how to, help them, meet their obligations. And I think Mr. Masondo has explained very well that position. I think, though, Mashudu, Cedric, I think this crisis also affords us the historic opportunity to relook at the depth and coverage of Sasria and revamp it and reimagine it, repurpose it, as South Africans like to say. And I think this is an ideal opportunity for us to do that. Over to you, Mashudu.
Thank you very much, Minister. We will now look at Lamise Omarji's question. She's from Fin24. So I had read out this question, but I'll read it out again. Is there scope for the SRD to become permanent after March 2020? Any views on whether it could be the basis for introducing a basic income grant?
Let's deal with the situation as we confront now. And that situation is that the president, don't tell the president I said this, please. It's just between us, Mashud. The National Treasury had indicated that we could extend the social relief of distress by 6 months only. And we were wrestling about this matter with the president. And he, being a very good negotiator from his union days, made us to cross over the line until the end of the financial year, which is March 2022. Now, the key question that this country has to confront is how are we as a constitutional democracy, a caring society, going to deal with this need to support those who can support themselves. And at the center of this answer is that we should make sure our education system works very well and is compatible or relates very well to the needs of a changing economy. The structural nature of our economy demands certain skills. Now, I've said this many times. I don't need to overemphasize it. We also need to look very careful at the relationship between the people on the ground in a municipality, for example. The municipality, the unemployed in a particular municipality, and what work could they do? Whether it's about cleaning our streets, it's about planting trees, it's about whatever, paving roads, brick paving, whatever. I think ordinarily people want to be engaged in some kind of work-related activity. And I think that's where the focus should be, and not just on the social relief of distress. Now, coming back to answer the question directly, is this a precursor to a basic income grant or some sort of permanent social support? The answer is, I don't know. I don't know. What I know is that we do need to respond to the dire situation in which our people find themselves. And future policymakers, wherever they might be, would be able maybe to answer the question more appropriately. But I think we should also focus on the production side of the economy, on actively being involved in working for a grant or something, but there must be some work. And there's a discipline that goes with work in society, and not just grants here and there. So I've answered the question. For now, we're dealing with the current situation, and the future is what we all look forward to. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. We will go through to Barbara Curson. She says, for Minister, please explain how communities should take responsibility. How can they protect infrastructure? How are they then allowed to carry arms to protect themselves from criminals who are armed and carry? Okay, so this one is from Barbara Kirsten. She is from MoneyWeb, and then carrying cans of petrol. So I'm not sure if it's something that you would like to respond to at this present moment, Minister, but we'll take that question. And then I've also got a question from Ray Mahaka. He is a journalist from the Daily Maverick. Mr. Ramaphosa said that the government would assist uninsured businesses that were affected by the recent violence. Does Treasury have a funding framework and costing for this measure? Thanks.
Well, for starters, I and I think the government of South Africa, led by President Ramaphosa, does not promote vigilantism in whatever form or shape. But communities have a responsibility, as I mentioned, because we know our neighbors. We know who is the thug and who is stealing, who is the violent criminal, who is a vigilante. We know that. And therefore, as communities, we have a responsibility to ensure that there is order, there is stability in our communities without having to carry arms and shooting people around and things like that. We should reinstate and reinvigorate street committees, ward committees, together with our ward councillors and everybody else, so that we keep our communities safe. So I promote the involvement of the community in safety. It can't always be that the government must do this or that. We can do things ourselves, working together with our local police station and so on, and the churches, the schools, school principals, teachers, kids, sporting associations, and so on. All of us as communities who are alive to the possibilities that South Africa offers. So I don't promote vigilantism at all. I don't promote criminal activity, but we can take peaceful means to stabilize our communities ourselves. What was the second one? You're muted, Mashud.
It was uninsured businesses.
Uninsured, yes.
Yeah. Can I leave that to DG Dondo to deal with, please?
Thank you, Minister. Let me deal with it. Momo, you please be ready to come on. Qualifying uninsured businesses will be covered. I think that's something. Let me put my video on, then my video continue. They will definitely be covered. And as I indicated earlier on, there's money that's reprioritized from within the Department of Small Businesses and the Department of DTIC. So it's expected that through that process, they should be covered. At the moment, discussions are ongoing, and that's why I wanted Momo to come in, because the presidency and ourselves met with the insurance companies, and there's ongoing discussions, and Momo has been central to that. And I want him to come on, Momo, and just explain what kind of conversations happened there and what exactly we are putting together as part of that support that is going to be going towards uninsured businesses. Thanks.
No, thanks, DG. And afternoon, everybody. As the DG has pointed out, I think we recognize certainly that these small businesses have taken a big hit and clearly need some sort of support to get back on their feet. We've been talking to a range of people, like the DG's outlined, the CEOs of insurance companies, the CEOs of banks. We've had discussions at NADLAC, because firstly, we've just tried to establish the extent of the problem. I know the minister has given a figure of 15 billion, but at the moment, we don't have specific information. And say together with the Reserve Bank, and working with the insurers as well, trying to establish the extent of the damage. Now, obviously, many of these businesses were not insured. So even the insurers won't have that information, because obviously there's no claims that have been put in. So we are looking at mechanisms, firstly, to try and identify the businesses that have been affected, the buildings that may have been destroyed. People may have been not fully insured. In some cases, the building may be insured, but not the stock. And this is, let me say, a big challenge. And we are, like we had the credit loan guarantee scheme, we are looking at an appropriate scheme to provide assistance. We don't want to, at this stage, commit beyond, because until and unless we know the scale of the damage and how extensive it is and what type of businesses to cover, it's very difficult to even have a scheme that we think would be workable. But I can say that there's been, in fact, this area is actually taking up probably most of our work in just trying to establish the facts and the data.
Thanks, Momo. Back to you, Mashudu.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, DG. We've got a question.
I think Mashudu, if I may, I'm sorry about that. It's a bit rude or hard to interrupt you. You see, in a shopping mall, for example, there are many businesses which operate there. More often than not, you'll find that some of those businesses are not registered for tax or for businesses and so on. So it's very difficult for us to have to come in handy to support businesses which have not been good corporate citizens. And Commissioner Edward Kisveta is here. He can talk about that. But I think we should, in the first instance, really focus our attention on the legally registered businesses that can be assisted, as DG Dondo Mukhajane and Ishmael Momomuyat have indicated. We really need that reboot, to get the economy back and operating as we indicated. Mashudu, thank you very much. I'm sorry about that. Mashudu, over to you.
Thank you very much, Minister. We will now get a question from, I just want to quickly go through this, from Linda Ensor. This is for Mr. Edward Kisveta, the Commissioner of SARS. Linda Ensor is from the Business Day. The President said tax revenue had improved due to the commodity cycle. Year on year to date, what is the extra revenue that has been raised that can be used for business and vulnerable people support?
Thank you, Mashudu. Just to complete the thought the Minister posited, I think it's important that we have said that one of the criteria for any business to draw on any support or relief measure that government provides, they have to be tax compliant. And by tax compliance, we mean that if you ought to be registered for tax, whatever tax that may be, you should be registered. You should be up to date with all your filings or the submissions. And thirdly, you must be up to date with all outstanding taxes or have an agreement in place to pay those taxes over a particular repayment period. We would encourage businesses to ensure in the next few weeks that they ensure their compliance, because that would at least give them some access to the relief measures that government provides. Specifically, on the issue of tax revenue, just to Linda will understand that the only time we will make a projection of revenue will be at the October announcement. But what we can share is probably two messages. The first is that we have had the best first quarter revenue collections over the last 3 years, which means that better than last year, but also the preceding quarter, first quarter of the year before that, which augurs very well for us in terms of the beginning to gain the momentum of revenue collections activities. But there are two underlying factors. The first being that we are very fortunate that in certain sectors of the economy, specifically financial sector and mining, we have seen a better than expected performance in corporate income taxes. And in terms of mining, manufacturing, and financial services, a better than expected performance in domestic VAT. And then together with that, we have a huge focus on revenue recovery. So a significant component of our revenue above target, above estimate at the moment comes from compliance activities. And we will regain or gain that momentum across the year, which gives the minister the confidence, and as the DG said earlier, that the measures that we introduce will be adequately covered by the additional revenue. I think it's also important that we don't hide from the fact that the events of the last month has in fact cost the country a loss of over 48 billion rand. And we shouldn't skirt around that issue, because South Africans must know what the cost of behavior that is unacceptable and that has a huge impact, not just on the short-term revenue, but also on the tax base as businesses are destroyed and jobs are destroyed. But we are confident that the positive trend will continue, and that gives the minister the confidence that the relief measures are well funded without any risk to the fiscal framework at the moment. Thank you, Mashudu.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kieswetter. So we're going to look at, there's a question from Gina Skuman, but I'll take it with a question of clarity from, I think it was Janice Roberts. So Gina Skuman is an economist from Citibank, and she's asking, how much does Sasria have available for the 15 billion to 20 billion rand estimated claims? And that's then in connection, that's will follow then to Janice's question, where she's asking for clarity on the 15 to 20 billion rand on Sasria. Is this the amount that the Treasury will have to bail out Sasria for, or the total amount Sasria will pay out? Private estimates of what Sasria will have to pay out are much higher than this. I think this question will then go to Mr. Cedric Masondo.
Cedric?
Yes, thank you, Mashuru. So, I mean, the Sasria's balance sheet in terms of the assets, it's about 9.7 billion. And we also have about 6.5 billion, which is the reinsurance. This is the money we're going to recover from the reinsurance through the CAT program that we've got. So that gives you an indication of how much money we can pay. And as we speak now, the liquidity is not an issue at the moment, because that's money, it's already in our balance sheet. And we've also launched the claims against the reinsurance company. And once we start paying the claims, we'll recover the money from the reinsurance. In my first response, I also indicated that we do have policies of 1 billion. So these are the policies where corporate clients will buy an additional 1 billion. So they are treated separately, because our liability in those policies will only be 20%, and the 80% will recover from insurance companies. So based on our estimates in terms of our CAT program, and also the money will recover from insurance for 1 billion, we could easily absorb up to 15 billion. But that also depends if we see an increase in premium. So if as a result of this event, there's an increase in premium, that also increases the money that's available for us. The 3.9 that's been indicated by the DG gives us some comfort to find different options on dealing with the amount that might be excess or which will be in excess of our capital and also reinsurance amount. Thank you, Mashudu. I hope I've answered the question.
Thank you very much.
And Mashudu, before you proceed, can I also indicate that Sasria is one of the better managed and run state-owned companies in the Republic of South Africa. During my tenure now as Minister of Finance, Sasria has declared the dividend twice. So Sasria and Telkom are the two companies which declared dividends, which indicates that these are properly run companies. And I think South Africans must know that we do have properly run state-owned companies in South Africa, and Sasria is one of them. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister. We've got another question from Nokukanya Ntambo. She is from Jacaranda FM. The first question from her is for you, Minister Mboweni, on the 350 Rand grant, but I think you've partially answered this question in your opening remarks and a bit of your remarks throughout the session. Is there any truth that you have succumbed to pressure from the government party to reinstate it as an election ploy? The second one is, can we also get an overall estimate or cost of damage across both the provinces during the unrest? You ministers only spoke about the 15 billion Rand, which is in eThekwini. And then the last one, if borrowing is not an option, what other alternatives are there to find money? And I think there also was another journalist who's also on the platform asking about the funding options. Thank you, Governor.
I explained, Mashudu, that we operate within a society which experiences a lot of distress. And any caring government has a responsibility to come to the support of its citizens. And that's why we're doing these things in these difficult times. Was there pressure from the governing party? No, there was no pressure from the governing party. Incidentally, political parties do not rule. They govern by the will of the people. Only absolute monarchies rule, but political parties govern. It's a very important distinction that has to be made. So did I get any pressure from the Lutulo House? No. Did Jessie Duarte from the Lutulo House, the Deputy Secretary General of the ANC, call me? No, she hasn't. The conversation was within the Ministry of Finance and the National Treasury with the President's office. And we really debated these issues. At some point, the conversations were very difficult. But we eventually agreed that given what the Commissioner of SARS has just said and what DG Dondo said, we're in a position that we could afford this 27 billion rand thereabout up to the end of March. And the rest of the debate between now and March really must happen as to what are we going to do as a society about these matters. Are we going to proceed on a grant system like that? Or are we going to proceed on a work for grant or whatever? But let's debate the issues. I don't want to get into trouble, as I usually do, but let's debate the issues and come to some conclusion about the scale and size of the destruction in KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng. I mean, the jury's still out there. But some of the estimates are that we probably have seen destruction up to about 50 billion rand. And I mean, that's according to maybe to the South African Property Owners Association. But there's massive destruction. And for the life of me, I cannot understand how banning a shopping center resolves anything at all. It doesn't. How banning trucks at the Moe River Plaza assists in anything. Doesn't. We now have problems at the Durban Harbour and port and so on. And so, yes, the estimates are about 50, but if you understand how economics functions, there might be there's the immediate destruction, say, plus minus 50 billion rand, but the multiplier effect around the economic system is huge. We really have to come to terms with this. Let me give an example. As a result of the damage in KwaZulu-Natal, petrol stations could not function in some parts of KwaZulu-Natal. And people had to drive to Harrismith to fill up. And then petrol and diesel ran out in Harrismith. That is, so it has a multiplier impact around the economic and ecosystem. And that's why I think as South Africans, we have to take responsibility for our actions and understand that our actions can either be positive in their multiplier impact or can be severely negative. And it's our responsibility. We're a free people, we're a free country, and we love our country so much. And therefore, we have to look after what we have, our assets and the assets of those who decide to invest, create jobs, employ people, get the economy going. And we have a responsibility, all of us, to protect that which we have as a South Africa Incorporated. Thank you, Mashud.
Thank you very much, Minister. I'd like to call up DDG Mampo Mudise. She'd like to clarify something on the 350 grant. Thank you. Mampo, you've got the floor.
Just a small issue is that the 350 is not an extension of the previous grant that was introduced and terminated in May. Rather, it's a reintroduction of the grant, and it will start when it will commence right now, rather than a continuation of what we have done in the past. So just making sure the media understands that this is a starting point rather than back paying for the month that the grant was not in existence. Thanks, Mashudu.
Thank you very much for that clarity, Mampo. We've got a question.
Maybe Mashud, Mampo, can you indicate when are payments going to start?
Right now, rather than a continuation of what we have done in the past. So thanks, Minister. We're still working with the Department of Social Development and SASA to make sure that the systems are in place. So as soon as we conclude that meeting, we will definitely, through the Minister of Social Development, have a media briefing, and the starting date will definitely be discussed then. Thanks, Minister.
Thank you very much, Mampo and Minister. We've got a question from Hilary Joffe. She's from Business Times. Please provide some detail on the 2.3 billion rand package to support small businesses. What measures does this include? Which companies will be able to access them? How many of the affected by the unrest might this reach? I'm not sure if that's something we'd be able to respond to at this point, Minister, but you'll indicate. And then let's take two, because there's a number of questions that have come through, and we should at least try get through to most of them. We've got Alex Winning from Reuters News Agency. This first question, could you specify how the 36 billion rand support package will be funded? If it is funded by cutting other programs, which programs will be cut? And could you provide more detail on the uninsured businesses and SMME support facilities? How much will they cost and what do they entail? Thank you.
Tito Mampo can come back on the small business, and Edgar can talk about how will this 36 billion rand be funded. I think and there are a number of questions looking at the chat box that belong to those categories. They can also talk more and answer some of the related questions coming from there. Mampo, just on the small business, the 2.3 billion, and Edgar on the other, please.
Thank you, DG. I just wanted to switch on my video. So I think the key is the two departments that we have worked with, which is the Department of Small Business Development and the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition. So basically with the Department of Small Business, they managed to reprioritize 300 million within their existing budget, and they will be transferring these funds to CIFA, which is their entity, and they will be using CIFA to reach those businesses that will need support. And then in terms of GTIC, what they have done is they have looked at the systems that they have and tried to reprioritize 700 million of the money within their budget, but they're requesting an additional 1.3 billion. Basically, what they're planning to do is to look at the different categories of support that they will need to do. So, for example, there will be businesses that are in malls where they are insured but not full cover. They're going to assist those. Others are not even insured. They're going to assist those. They're going to look at other businesses where the infrastructure itself was damaged, and those will not be in malls like the standalone businesses. They're going to look at that. They're also going to look at trying to get support for the informal businesses where they'll be looking at grant funding to see whether they can be helping some of these informal businesses. So the package that they're putting together mainly targets the businesses that are not going to be assessed by Sasria, but some of the businesses that will definitely be impacted on this. So that 1 point of that about 2 billion from the Department of Trade and Industry, we think that it would be sufficient to support these businesses. However, if you look at the budget process itself, is that once these departments do the assessment and they come back and say that they've identified other businesses and the amount that they have applied for is insufficient, the one way of looking at some of this will be through the adjustments budget. But the assessment that they have made so far, they are confident that the 2 billion will cover the businesses that are not covered, but also the amount that will be transferred by the Department of Small Business to CIFA is also going to help. We're still having conversations with the Department of Tourism just to check whether they can also reprioritize some of their funding for the sector, but they have been implementing some of the rescue grants and other support for the tourism sector. But for now, these are the two departments that we will be working with. Thanks.
So in a nutshell, what Mampo is saying, the details in terms of which businesses, how many there are, what's the size of those businesses, those are the details that the two departments will have. But we obviously discuss with them at a high macro level in terms of the quantum of money that will be needed. So again, it's not unlimited. However, they obviously have to work within the amounts that we've issued to them. Edgar, do you want to maybe explain the 36 billion and vis-a-vis, how it will be funded, etc., just buttressing some of the things that Edward and I had indicated. Thanks, Edgar.
Thank you very much. So, as DG indicated, the fiscal relief package we're announcing today will involve around 36.2 billion rands of new spending. Of the overall package, about 2.65 billion is being sourced from reprioritization. So together, the overall amount that will be focused on this comes to 38.85 billion. It's 36.2 of new spending and 2.65 of the reprioritization. Now, as required by Section 32 of the PFMA, the National Treasury will publish the quarterly revenue and spending position of government at the end of this week. These fiscal indicators will show that government is sufficiently ahead of its revenue target to accommodate the 36.2 billion rands of those fiscal measures, so long as those measures are temporary and once-off in nature. Therefore, the package can be accommodated without an increase in debt, in particular market-based financing. And for this reason, our fiscal strategy remains on track in that we don't anticipate that the fiscal deficit will increase as a result of this package, and we don't anticipate that the debt trajectory will change. Nevertheless, I do wish to reiterate that our fiscal position remains at risk because there are various risks to the fiscal position as indicated in the February budget. And there are also risks in respect of revenue because of the events that took place in July. For now, however, we are comfortable that we can deal with this additional spending as long as I said, it remains temporary, once off, because we do have confidence that a temporary increase in revenue emanating from a terms of trade benefit in respect of South Africa's key commodities can accommodate it at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mashudu.
Thank you very much, DG.
You know, DG, one of the most important things to note during this period is that the productive side of our economy is very important. We're benefiting in particular now from a tax point of view from the resilience of the mining sector. And I think it's very, very important that when we analyze the structure of the South African economy, we fully understand the impact of the productive side of the equation. And, you know, I think one of the large South African companies will be announcing their results during the course of the week, and you'll see the amount of tax that we are receiving from that one particular large South African company. And so it's important that we work together, big and small companies, to drive the South African economy. Big companies are important for small and medium enterprises in the same way as the opposite is also true. But the productive part of the economy is very important, and we must continue to support and nurture the productive side of the economy, be it through our attempts at creating a conducive environment, remove bureaucratic hurdles along the way, and make the private enterprise to thrive, create jobs and grow our economy. Thank you very much, Mashudu.
Minister, in fact, sorry, Mashudu, to come to do this to you again. You know, I mean, the minister and I do this all the time to you.
No problem, DG.
You know, I had a conversation, Minister, with a group of investors and people who buy our bonds last night. One of them is, you know, Ricardo Penfold, your friend from Goldman Sachs. I was saying to them, the fundamentals in South Africa are still in place. We have what it takes, the growth agenda and the reform agenda is still ongoing. And putting the unrest aside, we are and the numbers demonstrate that. The quarter-on-quarter numbers in terms of quarter one growth numbers, the revenue collection demonstrates that we were just disturbed by the unrest that we saw in the last 2 weeks or so. So the fundamentals, colleagues and friends, are in place. We are doing that and we are getting there. So, and this just so happened that at this point in time, we had a little bit of more money to actually address these once-off challenges that we are funding, and as Eddie explained. So I think we must be able to, you know, categorize the interventions and categorize the story that we said in the February vis-a-vis what we're saying now. It's the same. The reform agenda remains. Operation Vulindlela is beginning to demonstrate and show fruits. You know, when we introduced this, the budget it was as if we don't know what we're doing, appointing Dr. Sean Phillips with his team and Minister of Finance guiding this and the Deputy Minister of Finance guiding this. Many thought we don't know what we're doing, but we have seen all of the benefits and the fruits coming from the investments that we made in this intervention that we make. So the fundamentals are in place. The process is ongoing. All that's left for us is to take that further and not falter in terms of the plans that we have put in place. Thanks, Minister. And I'm sorry, Mashood.
No problem, DG. Thank you very much. I just wanted to indicate that I see colleagues are also responding to a number of questions in the chat box. So there will be questions that I will not be reading out to our panelists because already answers are being provided in the chat box. So I just ask colleagues to look out for those answers that are being provided by the colleagues on the panel as well as National Treasury executives. So we've got another question here in the chat box. I just quickly want to go to it. I'm not sure if Mr. Mboweni has seen this one. This is from Vino Govender from Circle of Global Businesswomen. Please advise when the deferment of payment of pay-as-you-earn taxes will be effective for businesses that are undergoing cash flow issues, as this impacts on our compliance rather and ability to work.
Thanks, Mashudu. I did reply on the chat that both the date for the PAYE deferral and the ETI is from the 1st of August for 4 months. We also will be issuing a much more detailed note on all the tax changes, which will accompany or which we'll also put out later in the day. And I should add that we'll also be publishing the TLAB and TALAB, the annual tax legislation, the draft for that, so that you will have all the information in the detail that you require. I should add, just from the other question, there's no deferral on VAT. And I think there's also questions on penalties and so on, but that I'll leave to SARS to answer.
Mashudu, this is a very serious press conference, but can we have some lighter moment? Momo, can you put up your tie a bit higher? No?
It's I'm wearing a suit after a long time, in a full suit, and even my trouser.
Shift it a bit to the right, and it will look nicer. Okay. Yeah, you look like a National Treasury official now. Thanks, Mashudu. Sorry about that.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister. You look lovely, Momo. You look great this afternoon. Thank you for the suit and tie. There's a question, Minister, from the Sowetan, Isaac Mahlangu. He's asking, government recently reached a salary increase deal with the public sector unions that will require 27 billion rand to fund. Will government be able to cover these increases, and where will government get these additional funds? And then also another question from colleagues at the Sowetan. What is the hold-up in Treasury systems as far as the decision to allow workers to access a portion of their pension to assist in times of economic pressures such as these? And what is the criteria to be applied for such access? So I think the second question will definitely go back to Mr. Mboweni, and then Governor, you or Minister, you will take the first question on the public sector wage unions. Thank you.
Public sector wage negotiations.
Indeed.
Yes. Again, I don't want to get into trouble, but Minister Mkunu, who is the minister responsible for the Department of Public Service and Administration, will deal with this matter in detail, I think, very soon. So you'll be able to explain that. What I've said before, and I hereby reiterate, is that whatever agreement is reached between the government as employer and the public service trades unions has to fit in within the fiscal framework, nothing outside the fiscal framework. So the Minister for the Department of Public Service and Administration is dealing with these matters. Within the fiscal framework, not outside the fiscal framework. We can't afford to go outside the fiscal framework. And I don't want to say anything here that is going to make Mr. Bekin Chalinchali unhappy, or anybody else, or the General Secretary of SADC, who doesn't like me at all, and he always looks for something I've said to attack me. I think there's some family problem somewhere in the process. He really hates me, but I don't hate him. I like him, but he must just stop hating me, and he must go and sort out the family problems outside the public domain. So that's all I can say about that. But on the accessing of a portion of the pensions for now during these difficult times, I think Momo is best dressed and suited to deal with the matter.
Thank you, Minister. Minister, I think on the accessing of pension funds, I want to emphasize what we've said both in the budget and in the MTBPS. We are working with it. There's a lot of complexities, and if we don't watch it, there'll be a rush to the door and will create liquidity problems. And that's why what we've said is, firstly, it's going to be a very limited window of access under very specific circumstances, and we will be linking that to introducing preservation. The biggest problem we have with our pension funds is that South Africans don't preserve. As soon as they resign their jobs, they leave and they cash out their pensions. And if you look at the numbers, you find that most people have just very small amounts left. And so the deal here is they'll be very limited, with the emphasis on the word limited, withdrawal, but it will be done with a tightening of preservation so that you can't withdraw those funds beyond what will be allowed. So what I anticipate, and we've been asked this many times even in Parliament, there's a bill from one of the parties as well, is that once we, and we are close to getting an agreement, once we develop a framework on this, we will try and table the legislation, because this one can only be done after you table legislation. It will also be linked to broadening coverage so that there's so that everyone who works and earns an income will be compelled to be a member of some pension fund. So these three measures will go together, and we hope to do that before the end of the year. So it's not immediate, because it will require legislation to go through Parliament.
You know, Mashudu, it's a very important point that Momo is making. It is really very important that when we are still of working age, we remember that we're going to retire one day. And our living standards will probably decline by about 70%. But that 30% will really depend on what we've saved in our pensions. So going around obliterating your pension now for current consumption, forgetting about the future needs. In other words, if you assume you're going to live at least until 100, after you have retired at the age of 65 up to 100, you still need to live, and you need that pension. So it is not that the government is being a nanny state trying to tell you what to do, but it's a burden sharing thing that going forward one should think about. It's very, very, very important. Otherwise you end up being on the Mudende queue, the SASA line. And we also don't want to burden the state with the SASA line the SASA queue rather, when we are working, and we can make provision for later when we retire. I think it's very, very important. So to access your pension fund today to go and buy a car which you might crash tomorrow is not very helpful at all. But I think the measures that Momo is talking about have to be followed through and will be implemented. Mashudu, over to you.
Thank you for the advice, Minister. Thank you very much. Another question from Terence Creamer, Creamer Media. When will this package go before Parliament? And see a recurring question about Sasria. What is the size of the actual claims before Sasria, and when will they begin paying the first claims, given that there will be no new borrowing to fund the 36.19 billion relief package? Please, could you take us through all the components of the financing again, including which departmental budgets will be cut or / reprioritized?
I think we were clear. We are not cutting budgets. What we are doing essentially, Mashudu, is we are reprioritizing from two departments, and it's simply funding their own mandate still, which is DTIC and small business development. The rest of the money is new money, as Edgar stated, and we at this stage it should be once off. So, but that's one part. On the second part, which is Minister's point around making sure that we remain within the fiscal framework. Departments know this, and this has been an ongoing conversation, that we must make sure that this is cushioned within existing budgets in terms of the wage bill that was agreed upon. And we will be firm, obviously, in engaging the departments, and we'll help departments find the relevant monies within so that the framework is maintained in a way that it should. Because if not, then we know the consequences of a framework that will obviously spill over and we may just have challenges. Our debt to GDP is going to be a challenge. Our deficit are going to be unmanageable. And those are things that we jealously guard at this point in time in our history of our country around how we manage our finances at this point in time.
Yes, the other day, DG was saying to me that I've introduced a very bad word or concept called sacrosanct, the sanctity of our fiscal framework. And he said, he hopes I don't regret this one day, but I think quite correctly, I think we're going to go towards the end of our briefing. Mashudu, of course, is in charge, but let me just say that just to draw everybody's minds back to the core issues as we conclude. One was saying that the National Treasury stands ready to continue supporting the Department of Health in the massive rollout of the vaccines in the country. That is so important in order to ensure that we protect our people against the ravages of COVID-19. Very critical for the economy to function and so on. Number two, we are saying that Sasria stands ready to process insurance claims from the businesses which were insured, which were destroyed. And as Cedric indicated before, Sasria is processing this very quickly, and other components of the insurance industry have provided support to Sasria for the quicker processing of claims. Three, we are reprioritizing the budgets of DTIC and the Small Business Development Department to the tune of some 2.3 billion in order to support small, medium, and micro enterprises which have been affected. And this is critical because small, medium, and micro enterprises are the so-called hidden champions of any economy. And these are critical even as far as promoting the participation of the hitherto discriminated part of our population. Four, we're saying that the Department of Employment and Labor, through the UIF, will reintroduce the TERS framework, TERS assistance, and together with the National Treasury, will work out how this is going to work. And speed is of the essence in this regard. 5, we are introducing the social relief of distress up to the end of March next year, as requested by the President. 6, specific tax measures are going to be introduced that Momo spoke about in order to help our economy going. And the final 2 points, as Commissioner of SARS has indicated, revenue collection has surprised on the upside, principally because of the mining industry, and therefore we're in a position to accommodate this new needs and or these requests that we're facing. But I must indicate that you must not get the impression that the bond auctions, which the Treasury undertakes on a regular basis, is going to stop. No, that will continue depending on how they read the market. We're in conversations, for example, with the World Bank about any possible facility that we might access, particularly because we need to support the vaccination program in the country. World Bank funding is available for South Africa at reasonably low interest rates than market rates. And so for the purpose of making sure that the ship continues to sail in the right direction, we're in conversation with the World Bank. I think as a country, we've crossed the Rubicon of whether we can borrow from the IMF and the World Bank or not. We've crossed that Rubicon. We now are at idem that we can borrow from the IMF and the World Bank, but for very clear purposes that I've outlined. Let me then end, Mashudu, by saying that, we are going through difficult times in South Africa, and difficult times require tough decisions. And this is what we're trying to do. We're rising to the occasion. We're dealing with difficult matters, and we hope that the South African population also understands us. So as we come to the end of this briefing, I'd really like to thank everybody for participating. There were over 120 or 128 of us in this conversation. But thank you very much indeed, and greetings from Makgobasloof. When you are allowed to travel from Gauteng to other parts of the country, please don't forget to come to Makgobasloof. It's a beautiful part of the country. Let's promote local tourism. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister. But before you log off, the Deputy Minister of Finance had his hand up for quite some time during your closing remarks, and he'd like to add something. So I just want to give him an opportunity to say a few words before we officially close the session. Thank you so much for also going ahead. A little bit over time. We had scheduled for 1 hour, and I pushed you a little bit, colleagues. Just a few more minutes for the Deputy Minister.
Mashudu is against protocol for anybody to speak after the minister.
It certainly is. It certainly is. I've just had his hand up, has been up for so long, and I humbly apologize, Minister Mboweni. I humbly apologize, but I would please request that the Deputy Minister...
No, Minister, you're absolutely right. I think it's really against protocol for me to speak after you. All I wanted to say is that if you compare us to emerging markets, we're the best in terms of the COVID relief package. If you compare South Africa to the emerging markets, India, Mexico, Russia, Brazil, we have provided the highest COVID-19 relief package since COVID came to our shores. That is, if you take COVID-19 expenditure to the share of GDP by country, South Africa is the highest. Unfortunately, I could not make this point before the minister could make his final remarks. And I think the other point is that these social reliefs, as the minister said, as the DG said, they will depend on the growth of the economy. And that's why we're doing our best insofar as the structural reforms are concerned, providing electricity, spectrum, water, to enable investors to do what they have to do in order to grow the economy. Unfortunately, the social disruptions, they do affect our ability to grow the economy. Thanks, Minister, for allowing me to break the protocol for the first and the last time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mashudu. I think I've got another interview just now coming up. Mashudu, over to you.
Thank you very much, Minister. Thank you very much for this press briefing and staying a little over time to accommodate all the questions that came through from the media briefing this afternoon. I would like to suggest to colleagues that if there are questions that have not been answered, please do send them through to our media desk. That's media@treasury.gov.za. And a lot of those questions will be answered by the officials who are always on hand to answer some of the questions that you put through to our media desk. And we do apologize for not getting through all the questions. There was a lot of interest for this media briefing today, and we do apologize, but please do send your questions to that media address. I'd like to say a very big thank you to the panelists that joined us this afternoon, Mr. Tito Mboweni, the Minister of Finance, Dr. David Masondo, the Deputy Minister of Finance, Director General of the National Treasury, Mr. Dondo Mukhajane, the Commissioner of SARS, Mr. Edward Kisfeta, Mr. Moss Mwasheng, he's the Chairman of Sasria, and Mr. Cedric Masondo, the CEO of Sasria, as well as all the National Treasury executives and officials who came through on the line to support us for this media briefing. I'd like to say a big thank you to everyone who joined us this afternoon, and do enjoy the day further. Thank you very much.